Hello, welcome. If you enjoy these stories, please check that you are following and drop a comment where you're listening from. It's a small way to contribute and tell the algorithm to recommend my stories to more people like you. Thank you dearly. There is a temperature at which a person stops being warm. The pulse fades to nothing, a hand confined. The skin goes pale, and then grey, and then hard. The eyes, if they are open, frost over. By every ordinary measure, by every rule a reasonable person has ever been taught, this is the end. But it is not, in fact, always the end. That is the strange place we are going to visit tonight. In 15 true, documented stories of people who came back from being frozen solid. As it turns out, there is a strange place that exists between being frozen and being gone. And in every single one of these stories, there is a second person. Someone who looks at their loved one, or a stranger who looks at the frozen body, the logical evidence, all of it, and refuses to believe what they see. These are the people who said, "Not yet." We begin in Norway, in the spring, though spring in the mountains near Narvik keeps its snow long after the valleys have gone green. Two people are on their knees at the edge of a frozen stream, holding on to a pair of ankles. That is all they can reach. A woman has gone through the ice head first, and the water beneath has pulled the rest of her under and pinned her there on her back against the underside of the ice. Her skis stand up through the hole she made, which is the only reason her friends know exactly where she is. They have her by the boots. And they hold on, because the alternative is to let go, and letting go is not a thing they are willing to do. The water is grey-green and moving fast under the ice, and it is very loud, and it is very cold. Cold enough that a body loses its heat into it faster than you would believe possible. For a while, near the beginning, they can hear her. She has found a small pocket of air trapped against the ice, and she is talking to them through the freezing dark, telling them she is all right, telling them to hold on. And then, after a time, the talking stops. They keep holding. The first rescue team reaches them and cannot break through. The ice is too thick, and they have come without the right tools. And the minutes go by the way minutes do when there is nothing you can do but count them. A second team arrives with a shovel and a pointed spade, and they cut down through the ice from the side. And at last they get to her, and they pull her out. 80 minutes she has been under. And here is what they find. A woman with no pulse, no breath, pupils blown wide and fixed the way a doctor is trained to recognize as the end. She is the color of ash. She is cold in a way that living things are not cold. Every person kneeling in that snow has seen death before, some of them professionally, and every instinct they own is telling them the same flat thing. That they were too late. That what they are holding now is a body. And not one of them stops. They start compressions on a chest that is colder than any chest they have ever worked on. They load her onto a helicopter. They keep pushing, keep breathing for her, through the whole long flight, past every reasonable point at which a sensible person would have looked up and said the words, "It is over. We tried." Nobody says the words. Now, I am going to do something to you here that I hope you will forgive. I am going to leave her there, in the air, over the mountains, with a circle of exhausted people refusing to let her go. Because to understand what happens to her, and to understand why any of them thought it was worth trying, we have to leave this stream and go somewhere else entirely. To a different country, a different cold, a different person on the ground, who everyone agreed was already gone. I will only tell you this much, and it is not a secret, only a small strange fact to hold in your hand as we go. The cold that does this to a body, that stills it and grays it and takes its pulse away, does something else at the very same time. Something quieter. We will come to understand it together. Slowly. The way the doctors themselves had to. For now, just know that the thing that looks most like death here is not always death, and that there is almost always someone who suspects as much and will not be talked out of it. We are close towards a milestone for this little channel, 500 followers. It is not much, I know, but it is progress, and I cannot get there without your help. So, if you have thoroughly enjoyed one of my episodes, share it with a friend who needs it. Follow if you have not. It matters more than it should. Thank you. Now, let's begin. McAdoo, Pennsylvania, is a small town in the Anthracite Country, the old hard coal region up in the northeast of the state, where the winters come down out of the hills with real conviction. In February of 2015, they were coming down hard. It had been one of those long stretches where the cold never quite lets go between storms, where the snow that fell a week ago is still there, packed and grey along the roads, and the ground itself has gone hard as iron. On the night of the 20th, Justin Smith was 25 years old, and he was doing what a great many 25-year-olds do on a Friday night. He was out with his friends. There was nothing remarkable about the evening, nothing that anyone would later be able to point to and say, "There, that was the thing that went wrong." There was just a night out, and the ordinary business of being young in a small town. And then, at some point, the walk home. Justin set off on foot. It was not far, the kind of distance a person covers without thinking about it, the kind of walk you have made 100 times. The temperature that night was around 4 degrees below zero, Fahrenheit. Cold enough that the air has a bite to it that gets into your lungs. Cold enough that the snow squeaks under your boots. But not a cold that a healthy young man walking home would think twice about. Not for a walk of a few minutes. Somewhere along that walk, on a quiet road, something happened. The best reconstruction anyone could make afterward is the simplest one. He slipped. He fell. It is likely he struck his head when he went down, hard enough to knock him out, or hard enough that he could not get himself back up. And he came to rest there, off the road, in the snow. And the night went on around him. This is the part that is hard to sit with. So let us sit with it plainly and without cruelty. He lay there for a long time. The porch lights of the town were on somewhere. Cars may have passed, not knowing. The cold that had been merely brisk to a moving, thinking young man became something else entirely to a still one. It rose up through the snow and into him from the ground, and it came down on him from the air, and it began, hour by hour, to take his heat. He was there through the small hours. He was there as the sky moved toward morning. By the time anyone would find him, he had been lying in that snow for something like 10 to 12 hours. His father was named Don. When Justin did not come home and did not answer, the worry that any parent knows began its slow climb in the house. And in the morning, Don Smith went out looking for his son. I am not going to embellish what he found, because the plain fact of it is heavy enough, and because Don himself described it later in words so simple that they do not need help. He found Justin in the snow, and he knew, in the way a father knows things he does not want to know, what he was looking at. He was blue, Don said. He was lifeless. I checked for a pulse. I checked for a heartbeat. There was nothing. Nothing. Think about what that word is carrying. A man kneeling in the snow beside his own grown child, doing the two things every human being knows to do: pressing fingers to the throat, laying a hand or an ear to the chest, and finding in both places silence. No flutter at the neck, no rise and fall, the skin cold and the color wrong. Everything that a body is supposed to do to tell you there is still someone inside it, not happening. By every measure Don had, and by every measure any of us would have, his son was dead. What happens next is the ordinary machinery of a death. Not the machinery of an emergency, you understand. There is a difference, and everyone at the scene understood the difference. When someone collapses and there is a chance, you get sirens and speed and people shouting over each other. When someone has plainly been gone for hours, cold and stiff in the snow, you get something quieter and more terrible. You get the coroner. You get the state police. You get the slow, respectful procedural handling of a person who is past saving, whose death now belongs to paperwork and to grief. The coroner was called. This was, as far as the scene was concerned, a body to be pronounced and taken away. And that is nearly how the morning would have ended. And this would be a very short and very sad story, if not for a decision made a little later by a man who was not there in the snow and who had not yet seen Justin at all. Justin was taken to the hospital in Hazleton, and there he came under the care of an emergency physician named Dr. Gerald Coleman. Now, you have to understand the situation from Coleman's side of it, because it is genuinely extraordinary that what happened next happened at all. In front of him was a young man who had been lying outdoors in below zero cold for the better part of half a day, who had no pulse, whose body had gone so cold and so rigid that in Coleman's own later description, his chest wall was frozen solid. Frozen. Not cold, not stiff. Solid, so that the doctor pressing on that chest to begin compressions was pressing on something that did not give the way a living chest gives. There is a temptation to hear all of that, and to think that the sensible, the humane, the correct thing would have been to stop, to say the words gently, and let the family begin to mourn. Coleman did not stop. Because Coleman knew something, an old rule that runs quietly through emergency medicine and through the world of mountain rescue and cold water drowning. A rule that we are going to hear again tonight more than once, until it stops sounding like a slogan and starts sounding like the truth. The rule is this: when a person is very, very cold, you cannot trust the ordinary signs of death. The stillness might not be death. It might be the cold, holding a life in a kind of suspension, waiting. And so you do not pronounce a frozen patient dead based on the cold body in front of you. You warm them first. And only if they are still gone once they are warm, only then are they truly gone. So Coleman treated Justin Smith not as a body, but as a patient. His team began CPR, and they did not do it for a few minutes. They did it for 2 hours. 2 hours of compressions on that frozen chest, keeping a trickle of blood moving through a man with no heartbeat of his own, while they arranged what came next. And what came next was a helicopter and a flight to a larger hospital, Lehigh Valley, at Cedar Crest, where they had a machine that could do the one thing that mattered. The machine is called ECMO. The letters stand for a mouthful of medical Latin, but what it does is simple to picture. It takes the blood out of the body, and it warms it, and it adds oxygen to it, and it puts it back, gently, from the inside. It is, in effect, a way to thaw a person from their core outward, while doing the work of the heart and lungs that the person cannot yet do for themselves. They connected Justin to it, and they waited, and they watched his temperature climb, 1 careful degree at a time, up out of the deep cold he had fallen into. When they had first been able to get a reliable reading, his core body temperature was 68 degrees Fahrenheit. A normal human runs at 98.6. 68 is a temperature the medical literature associates with the dead. It is roughly the temperature of a cool room. That is how cold the middle of him had become. And then, about 90 minutes after the machine began its work, warming him from the inside, something moved in a man who had not had a heartbeat since the night before. His heart began to beat. It would be a fine thing to tell you that Justin sat up and thanked everyone and went home. That is not how bodies work, and it is not what happened. When a person has been that cold for that long and is dragged back across the line, the coming back is slow, and it is uncertain. And for a long while, no one can promise you what exactly is coming back. The heart can restart after all, and still leave you with a mind that never returns. That was the real fear now, not whether he would live. Whether Justin, the actual Justin, the one his father was looking for, was still in there. He was in a coma for 15 days. His parents sat through those 15 days in the particular purgatory that hospitals build, where a monitor shows you a heartbeat that means your child is alive and tells you nothing about whether your child is still your child. Early scans of his brain activity were flat, and then, later, they were not flat. The signal came back. The swelling they feared in his brain never came. Day by day, the machines and the doctors gathered up small pieces of evidence, and the pieces began to point, impossibly toward whole. When he woke, he was whole. He would say later, one of those things that a person only says after they have been somewhere the rest of us have not. It's like, "I woke up from a dream," he said. But it wasn't a dream. He had no memory of the walk, or the fall, or the long night, or the days of his own dying and return. There was only the ordinary going to sleep of an ordinary night. And then, across a gap of nearly 3 weeks that had held his father's grief and a coroner's forms and 2 hours of CPR and a machine warming his blood, an ordinary waking, as if none of it had touched the part of him that was him. The cold had not left him without a bill to pay. He lost all 10 of his toes. He lost both of his smallest fingers. The far edges of him, the parts of freezing body sacrifices first to keep the core alive, could not be saved. He would walk differently, and his hands would carry the mark of that night for the rest of his life. But he walked, and he thought, and he remembered, and he laughed, and he went back to Penn State and finished the psychology degree he had been working toward. And in January of the following year, healed as much as he was going to heal, Justin Smith went back to the hospital that had refused to let him go, to shake the hands of the people who had spent 2 hours pressing on a chest that everyone but them had already given up on. Justin was found by a man who loved him, a father who could not save him alone, but who would not walk away, and handed to a doctor who knew that cold can lie. The next person we are going to meet was found by a man who barely knew her on a road in Minnesota 35 years earlier, when there was no machine at all to warm her blood. Only a country doctor, a few heating pads, and the same stubborn refusal to believe what the body was so plainly saying. Go back now, from 2015 to 1980, and from Pennsylvania to the flat, cold farmland of northwestern Minnesota, near a small place called Lengby. If you have never stood out in the open, in that part of the country in the deep of winter, it is difficult to convey. There is not much between you and the sky. The wind comes across the fields with nothing to slow it, and the cold it carries is not the brisk cold of a walk home. It is a cold that means it. On a bitter December night in 1980, Jean Hilliard was 19 years old, and she was driving home. The temperature outside was around 22 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. And her car, on an icy country road, slid off into the ditch and would not come out. She was not far from help. That is the small, sharp detail that this whole story turns on. She knew the area. She knew that the home of a friend, Wally Nelson, was within walking distance, and so she did the reasonable thing. The only thing, really, which was to leave the useless car and set out on foot toward his house. She was dressed for a night out, and not for a march through 22 below. A coat, mittens, and of all things, cowboy boots. I will let myself smile at the cowboy boots just for a moment, because Joan would want us to, and because there is something so ordinary and so human in it. She was a young woman in 1980 in rural Minnesota, and she had a pair of boots she liked, and they were not the boots for this. None of us dress for the disaster we are not expecting. So she walked in her coat and her mittens and her cowboy boots toward the light of Wally Nelson's house. She very nearly made it. The best account has her going down about 15 feet short. 15 feet from the door. Some small thing, a patch of ice, a stumble in the dark, a body already slowing in the cold. And she fell, and she did not get up. And there she lay, face down in the snow, within sight of the house she was walking to, for something like 6 hours, through the coldest part of that Minnesota night. The porch light was right there. That is the image to hold. Right there, and no help at all. It was Wally Nelson who found her in the grey of the early morning, when he went outside and saw a shape in the snow near his house. What he went to was not, by any sign he could read, a living woman. She was face down, and she was rigid. Not stiff with cold the way your fingers go stiff, but rigid all the way through, frozen into the posture she had fallen in. When Wally tried to lift her, to get her into his car and to help, he found he could not bend her. Her body would not fold to fit through the door of the vehicle. She was, as far as her limbs were concerned, solid. He did the only thing he could. He got a grip on her by the collar of her coat, and he skidded her, stiff and whole, up onto his porch, and then got her to the car and drove for the hospital in Foston, thinking, surely, that he was driving a body to town. At the hospital, the doctor on duty was named George Souther, and it fell to him to examine what Wally had brought in. And the description Dr. Souther gave afterward has travelled through the decades since, because there is no gentle way to say it, and he did not try to find one. The body was cold, he said, completely solid. Just like a piece of meat out of a deep freeze. Consider that this is a physician speaking, a man trained to be precise, to reach for the clinical word. And the clinical word failed him, because there was no clinical word for what was on the table. So he reached for the plainest comparison a person could make. Meat out of a freezer. That is what her body was like to the touch, and to the hand that tried to move it. Her face was ashen, her eyes by the contemporary accounts, were opened and frozen so, glassed over. When they tried to find her temperature, the thermometer could not do it. Her core had fallen below the lowest mark the instrument was built to read. I want to be careful and honest with you here, the way the story deserves. You will sometimes hear a specific number attached to Jean Hilliard. The truest thing anyone can say is the thing they said at the time. Her temperature was too low to register. It was off the bottom of the scale. Leave it there, because that is where the facts leave it, and it is more chilling than any number anyway. And there was one more detail passed down from that morning that tells you everything about the state of her. When someone went to put a needle into her, to begin trying to help, the needle would not go in. Her skin was frozen too hard to pierce. That detail comes to us from the doctor and from the reporting of the day, and I give it to you the way I received it, as the astonished description of the people in that room, and not as a laboratory measurement. But you understand from it what they believed they were dealing with. Not a patient. A frozen thing in the shape of a young woman. They could find no pulse. Here is where 1980 makes this story different from Justin Smith's. There was no helicopter waiting to carry Jean to a machine that would warm her blood from the inside. There was no ECMO. There was a small hospital in Fosston, Minnesota, and a doctor, and some heating pads, and a set of hands, and a decision to make. The decision was whether there was any point at all. And what tipped it, what kept the people in that room from doing the sensible and sorrowful thing, was a sound. As they worked over her, as they began, cautiously, to try to bring warmth back to a body that seemed past it, someone heard something. A faint sound coming out of her, barely there, a whimper. The doctor put it plainly afterward. "We picked up an extremely faint whimper," he said. "We knew there was a person existing then." A person existing, not a body. A person somewhere down inside all that cold and stillness, still there. It is such a small thread to hang everything on, but it was enough. It was the same thing, in the end, that kept Don Smith checking, and kept Dr. Coleman working, and kept those rescuers holding on to a pair of ankles in Norway. The refusal to accept the appearance of the end while there was any thread at all still uncut. Someone in that Fosston hospital heard a whimper and decided, on the strength of it, not yet. So they warmed her, slowly, with what they had. Heating pads and blankets and time and care, because to warm a deeply frozen body too fast is its own kind of danger, one the doctors of the day understood at least well enough to be gentle. They watched over her, and later, when they could find it, they measured a pulse of about 12 beats a minute. 12. A resting heart usually turns over 60, 70, 80 times a minute. Hers was ticking over roughly 12 times, so slow and so faint that it had hidden from the first hands that searched for it. The cold having wound her down almost, but not entirely, to stillness. And they did not know, hour by hour, what they were bringing back. whether a mind would come with the body, whether a young woman who had been frozen through would wake, if she woke at all, as herself. She woke as herself. The recovery, when it came with a speed that stunned the people who had prepared themselves for the opposite. She had been brought in a rigid, ashen, pulseless figure in the dark of early morning. By noon of that same day, Jean Hilliard was conscious and talking. By noon, the body that a doctor had compared to meat from a deep freeze, that a needle could not pierce, that no thermometer could measure, sat up inside its own life and began to speak. As with Justin decades later, the deepest fear had been for her mind. And as with Justin, the mind was there, whole, present, hers. She did not escape entirely without cost. The parts of her that had frozen most deeply, her feet and toes blistered badly the way severely frostbitten flesh does. There were weeks of that, of healing, of the body sorting out what could be saved. But saved it was. Jean Hilliard lost nothing. No toes, no fingers, no piece of herself to the amputation that everyone would have thought inevitable for a woman found frozen solid in a Minnesota ditch. She healed and she went on, and she lived an entirely ordinary and entirely miraculous life, the two words meaning, in her case, exactly the same thing. Married, children, decades. She was still there to tell the story herself well into this century. An old woman now, still faintly amused, I like to think, that the world remembers her as the girl who was frozen solid and lived. Now, you remember the woman we left under the ice in Norway? In the spring, with a circle of people holding onto her ankles, and then, in a helicopter, refusing to stop. It is time to go back for her, because everything we have watched so far, a father's refusal, a doctor's rule, a country physician and a whimper, all of it was medicine feeling its way in the dark towards something it did not yet fully understand. In a hospital in the far north of Norway, on a spring night in 1999, a team of doctors was about to understand it. And they were about to give the rest of us the sentence that explains every story in this collection. Her name was Anna Borgenholm, and in the spring of 1999, she was 29 years old. A Swedish woman working as a trainee doctor, an orthopedic resident at the hospital in Narvik, in the north of Norway. She was near the beginning of a career in medicine. She could not have known that spring that she was about to become one of the most studied patients in the history of her own profession. The doctors who would never meet her would learn her case. That the sentence her survival produced would be printed in journals and taught to students and repeated at the bedsides of the frozen for as long as there is medicine at all. On the 20th of May, she went skiing. She went with two friends, and this detail matters, so hold on to it. Her two friends were also doctors. Marie and Torvin, colleagues from the hospital, out on a familiar mountain run, off the marked trails, on a slope they knew. The three of them skiing together in the long northern light. Three young doctors on a day off, and none of them at work, and all of them, as it turned out, about to be very much at work. Anna lost control on the descent. She fell and she slid, and she went headfirst toward a stream at the bottom of a gully, a stream still crusted over with the ice of the fading winter. She hit the ice head and shoulders first, and she broke through it, and the water beneath took her. But it did not take all of her. This is the thin, strange piece of luck the whole thing hangs on. She went through head first, so that her head and her upper body were pulled under and pinned by the current against the underside of the ice, on her back, in the dark, cold water. And her skis and her feet stayed up, sticking out through the hole she had made. Her friends, arriving in seconds, could reach those feet. They could not reach anything else. So they took hold of them, and they held on. And Anna, beneath the ice, did not immediately drown. She had found, against the underside of that ice, a pocket, a thin space of trapped air. And so for a while, an astonishing while, she was alive under there, conscious in water so cold it is difficult to describe, with her friend's hands locked around her ankles, all of them fighting the current together, waiting for help that Marie and Torvind had called for within minutes. Think about the two on the surface, on their stomachs at the edge of the ice, gripping the ankles of their friend, feeling the pull of the water trying to take her from them, and able to do nothing else. Not able to break the ice, not able to lift her out against the current, only able to hold and to talk to her and to keep her from being swept fully under, and to wait. And think about Anna underneath, in the black-green cold, in her pocket of air, feeling the heat go out of her into water that wanted all of it. For a time, she stayed calm, stayed present, called up to them. And the cold worked on her the way it works, slowing everything. First the shivering, then the thinking, then the struggling. The talking stopped, the movement stopped. Somewhere in there, about 40 minutes into it, her heart stopped too. Her friends could not know that exactly. They only knew she had gone still and quiet, and that they were now holding the ankles of someone who no longer answered. And still they did not let go. The first rescue team reached them and found a problem that all the will in the world could not fix in the moment. The ice was thick, and they had not brought what they needed to cut it. So there was a further terrible wait, minutes stacked on minutes, while the right tools were found. A second team came with a sharp garden spade, an ordinary pointed shovel, and they went at the ice from the side, cutting down and in toward her, until at last they broke through to a place they could pull her from, and they drew Anna Borgenholm up out of the water and onto the snow. She had been under the ice for 80 minutes, and on the snow, in the open air at last, she showed every sign there is of death. No pulse, no breath. Her skin was ashen, drained of all color. Her pupils were fully dilated, blown wide and fixed, which is one of the signs a doctor is taught to read as the brain being gone. She was, in the flat clinical language, without vital signs. She was as cold as the water that had held her. Her two friends, the doctors, began CPR on her right there, and they kept it going, hands on her chest, breath into her lungs, as she was loaded onto a helicopter for the flight to the larger hospital, the university hospital far to the north, in Tromsø. It is about an hour's flight. For that entire hour, they did compressions on a woman with no heartbeat, in a helicopter over the Norwegian mountains. An hour of keeping the blood of a dead-seeming woman moving by hand on faith toward a team that had not yet seen her and did not yet know she was coming in quite this condition. The team at Tromsø was led by an anesthesiologist named Mads Gilbert, and it is worth stopping on the moment he first saw her, because he described it later with the exactness of a man who has decided to tell the truth about a hard thing. She has completely dilated pupils, he said. She is ashen, flaxen white. She is wet. She is ice cold when I touch her skin, and she looks absolutely dead. She looks absolutely dead. That is the doctor in charge, the expert, the man whose job it is to know. His own eyes and his own hands were telling him he had been handed a corpse. A woman with no pulse for the better part of 2 hours, whose body had gone as cold as meltwater, whose pupils gave the sign of a brain already lost. And here is the whole of tonight, the thing the entire collection turns on, spoken by a man looking at what appeared to be a dead woman on a table. Gilbert and his team did not treat what their eyes reported. They treated what they knew about cold. And what they knew was that a body this cold cannot be pronounced by its appearance. That the very deepness of the cold might be the thing keeping her alive, if alive is even the word for the grey country she was in. And so they held to the rule, the old sentence that this exact team would later put into the title of a scientific paper, so that it would belong to the record and not just to the ward. Nobody is dead until they are warm and dead. She was not yet warm, so she was not yet to them dead. They put her on the machine. A heart-lung bypass. The fullest version of what warmed Justin Smith 16 years later. A system that takes the blood out, warms it, oxygenates it, and returns it, doing the work of the stopped heart and the still lungs, while degree by careful degree, it thaws the patient from the very center outward. More than 100 members of staff cycled through that room over the hours it took, working in shifts, because it takes that many hands and that much time to bring a person up out of a cold that deep without killing them in the rewarming, which is its own separate danger. And now, let me finally tell you the thing I asked you at the very start of the night to simply hold in your hand. The reason the rule is true. The reason the cold is not only the villain here. When a body cools, everything inside it slows down. And that includes the brain. The brain is the most demanding organ we have. A furnace that burns through oxygen without pause, which is why, at normal temperature, only a few minutes without blood flow will destroy it forever. That is the whole tragedy of an ordinary drowning, an ordinary cardiac arrest. The clock is merciless because the warm brain starves so fast. But a cold brain does not burn like that. For roughly every single degree the body falls, the brain's hunger for oxygen drops by something like 6 to 10%. Cool it deeply enough, and its demand falls so far that it can wait. Minutes that would mean certain, total, irreversible brain death at 98 degrees become, at 50-something degrees, survivable. The cold, the very thing stopping her heart, the very thing that looked like it was killing her, had reached her brain first and put it into a kind of held breath, a suspension protecting it through the long minutes her heart lay quiet. The cold that nearly killed Anna Borgenholm is the reason there was anything left to save. That is the paradox under every story tonight, said once, plainly, here, where it was first fully understood. And I will not lecture it again, but you will feel it now, underneath all the rest, like a hand under the small of the back. Her core temperature, when they measured it, was 13.7 degrees Celsius. In the Fahrenheit, some of you think that is about 57 degrees. It was at the time the lowest body temperature that any adult had ever been known to survive. I want to be honest and precise with you, because this story has been told carelessly in a lot of places, and it does not need the exaggeration. Anna's is the lowest survived by an adult. There is, in the record, one person who went lower and lived, a small child in Poland years later. A toddler whose temperature fell to somewhere around 11.8 degrees Celsius before the doctors brought that little one back. We will not tell that whole story tonight, but honesty demands the mention, because the truth is remarkable enough, without inflation. Anna Borgenholm sits at the far edge of what an adult body has ever endured and returned from. That is enough. That is more than enough. Her heart had been stopped for something close to 2 hours and 35 minutes. There is a time written in the record. 22:15. 10:15 at night. That is the minute. After everything, after the 80 minutes under the ice and the hour of CPR in the helicopter, and the shifts of 100 people and the slow thawing of her blood, that Anna Borgenholm's heart began on its own to beat again. 2 hours and 35 minutes of stillness. And then, at 22:15, a pulse. But you know by now, because we have done this twice already tonight, that the beating of the heart is only the first door, and that behind it is the longer and more frightening question of the mind. She did not wake at 22:15, or that night, or the next day. She lay in intensive care for weeks. She was on a ventilator for 35 days, a machine breathing for her while her body decided what it was going to do. When she first woke around 10 days in, she was paralyzed from the neck down, and no one could yet promise her or her family that the paralysis would lift, or that the woman coming back would be the whole of the woman who had gone under. The paralysis lifted. Slowly, over the weeks, Feeling and movement came back to her body, from the center outward, the way the warmth had. And her mind, when the full accounting could be made, was intact. No permanent brain damage. The organ that the cold had reached first and protected best came back to her entirely. Anna was not left untouched. 2 hours and 35 minutes at the door of death, and the deep freezing of every far edge of her left nerve damage in her hands and her feet. Small damage by the measure of what might have been. But she was training to be an orthopedic surgeon, a profession that lives or dies by the fine control of the hands, and the damage was enough to take that from her. She would not be a surgeon, so she became a radiologist, and not at just any hospital. Anna Borgenholm went to work as a radiologist at Tromsø University Hospital. The same hospital. The room where 100 people had cycled through the night, refusing to call her dead, became, in time, her place of work. She built her whole career in the building that had built her back. She has spoken over the years with a doctor's understatement about a patient who happens to be herself. When you are the patient, she said, you are not thinking you are going to die. You think, I am going to make it. But as a medical person, I think it is amazing that I am alive. As a medical person, she, of all people, knows exactly how dead she was supposed to be, and she gets up every morning and goes to work in the place that decided otherwise. That was a woman brought back by 100 people and a machine, at the outer limit of what a hospital can do. The next man we are going to meet was brought back the same way, by the same kind of machine, in the cold water of a Norwegian fjord. But he left behind something that almost no one who crosses into that grey country ever leaves behind. He left a recording, a minute-by-minute record kept by a small device on his own body, of his heart slowing down and stopping and coming back. Stay in Norway and come down out of the mountains to the sea. In December of 2007, a man of 48 went out alone in his kayak. He was not a beginner and not a tourist. He was fit, experienced, the kind of paddler who knows his own water and his own boat, out on a route around an island that he had every reason to think of as familiar and safe. The sea that day was cold, about 3.5 degrees above freezing on the Celsius scale, just above the point at which salt water turns to ice, which is to say, lethally cold. The kind of water that steals the strength from a strong swimmer in minutes. And the weather was rougher than it looked, a stiff wind pushing up a chop out on the open water. He was a good distance from shore, perhaps 500 meters, and better than 3 hours into his paddle when he capsized. He did the right thing, the calm thing, first. He had a waterproof phone, and he used it, and he called for help before the cold took his hands and his voice. That call is likely the only reason we know his story at all. Then the water did what that water does. It pulled the heat and the strength out of him, and he went under, and by the time a search and rescue helicopter found him, He was face down in the sea, in cardiac arrest. No pulse. Another still shape in the cold water, another person any reasonable observer would have counted as lost. Here is the strange and quiet thing that sets him apart. He was a man who trained, and like a lot of people who train, he wore a heart rate monitor, a chest strap, and a watch, the ordinary gear of a person who likes to know how hard his heart is working. He had been wearing it when he capsized, and it never stopped doing its job. While the man drowned, while the cold slowed him and stilled him, the little device strapped to his chest kept faithfully recording, beat by beat, the rate of a heart that was winding down. It logged the slowing. It logged the failing. And it logged, in its plain machine way, the moment the numbers ran out. It was, without anyone intending it, a black box for a dying man. A witness made of plastic and circuitry to a thing that almost always happens unseen, in the dark, with no one watching and nothing kept. They pulled him from the sea, and they did for him what Tromso had done for Anna. They warmed him with a bypass machine, from the inside out, doing the work of his heart while his own heart could not. His core temperature had fallen to about 20.6 degrees Celsius. That is cold, dangerously cold, though not the deep abyss that Anna went to, and I will not pretend otherwise, because the wonder here is not the extremity of the temperature. The wonder is the arithmetic of time. His heart, by the record, was stopped for something on the order of 3.5 hours before they brought it back. And they did bring it back. After about a month in the hospital, 3 weeks of it in intensive care, the kayaker went home. No lasting damage to his brain, no piece of his mind left in the fjord. He walked back into his life whole. But he carried out of it something no one else in this story owns. A graph. A recorded line drawn by the watch on his own chest of his heart getting slower and slower, and then stopping, and then, hours later, after strangers and a machine had refused to give up on him, beginning again. Most people who go where he went bring back nothing, not even a memory. He brought back the data of his own death and return, printed in a small device's ordinary, honest numbers. A man who can look at a chart and point to the minute his heart gave out, and then point a little further along to the minute it changed its mind. Cold water has been swallowing people for as long as there have been boats to spill them into it. And there is one stretch of cold water more famous than any other in the world, one night of it that we have told and retold for over a century. So let us go there, to the North Atlantic, in April of 1912, to meet a man who spent hours in that water, on the most famous night the sea has ever had, and who, by every rule of that water, should have died in it, and did not. You know the ship. Everyone knows the ship. So let us not linger on the parts you already carry, the band and the lifeboats and the great black shape going down by the bow, under a sky absurd with stars. Let us instead find one man among the 2,000 and more aboard, a man who was not a passenger of note, not a millionaire, not a captain, a baker. His name was Charles Jockin, and he was the chief baker of the Titanic, in charge of the ovens and the loaves that fed a floating town. And on the night the ship struck ice and began, slowly and then not slowly, to die, Charles Jockin did a number of things that laid end to end make one of the oddest and most instructive survival stories of that entire disaster. First, he behaved well, which is worth saying plainly. He set his bakers to work carrying bread up to the lifeboats, provisioning them, and he helped get people into the boats, and by several accounts, he was firm and useful in the getting of women and children over the rail and away. He did his job on a ship that was ceasing to be a ship. Then he did something clever and slightly mad and entirely his own. As the end came near, Jockin went through the officers' quarters and began throwing deck chairs overboard. Around 50 of them, by his own telling. Heavy wooden deck chairs pitched over the side into the dark, one after another, so that there would be something, anything, for people in the water to hold on to. It is a strange image, a baker in the last minutes of the Titanic, methodically flinging furniture into the sea, and it tells you something about the particular calm of the man. And then, having done what he could for everyone else, Charles Jockin went below, and he had a drink. I am not going to pretend he did not, because he told it himself, and it matters to the story in a way we will come to. He took a stiff drink of spirits, and then he went back up, into the last of it, onto a ship that was now tilting toward the vertical, and he made his way toward the stern, the high back end of her, which was rising up out of the sea as the bow went under, carrying the last of the living up into the cold night air above the water. He stepped to the rail. He was, by his own account, just about the last man on the ship, still above the water, and he rowed her down. This is the detail that makes Charles Jockin more than a footnote. He did not leap into the sea and swim the way so many did, thrashing into water at around 28 degrees Fahrenheit, water below the freezing point of fresh water, kept liquid only by its salt, water that kills most people who enter it in well under half an hour. He rowed the stern of the Titanic down into the ocean the way, he said, you might ride a lift, an elevator descending. And he stepped off, or was lowered by the sinking of the ship itself, into the water so gently that, in his own words, his head barely got wet. That sounds like a small thing. It is not a small thing. In the cold water disaster, the first shock is one of the great killers. Sudden immersion in freezing water makes the body gasp involuntarily, and if your head goes under at that moment, you breathe water and you are gone, and it makes the heart lurch, and it steals your breath and your control all at once. John, riding the ship down, kept his head up and stepped into the sea already braced and calm, and did not suffer that first killing shock. His head stayed relatively dry. And there is real physiology in that, because a great deal of the body's heat pours out through the head, and a man who keeps his head up and dry in freezing water holds his warmth longer than a man swimming with his face in it. And then he was in the North Atlantic, in the dark, among the dying, for a long time. He said, It was around 2 hours. He treaded water and floated, and kept himself together in a way that almost no one around him managed, and eventually he made his way to an overturned collapsible lifeboat, Collapsible B, crowded with men clinging to its hull, and he held on near it in the water until at last there was room, and he was pulled up by a cook named Isaac Maynard, and he survived to be taken aboard the rescue ship Carpathia in the morning. Now, I owe you some honesty here, because this is a story that has been polished by a century of retelling, and we are in the business tonight of the true thing, not the shiny one. Historians argue about that 2 hours. Charles Johin testified to it, but the physiology troubles a lot of people who have looked hard at it, because 2 full hours submerged in 28-degree water is beyond what the human body is generally thought able to endure, even for a calm man with a dry head. The likeliest truth is that he was not fully submerged the whole time, that he kept much of his upper body up out of the water, on debris and against the collapsible, in a way that bought him the margin. The 2 hours may be the honest memory of a man for whom that night surely felt like a great deal longer than 2 hours. We can hold the wonder of it without swallowing every minute whole. What is not in doubt is that he was in and around that lethal water far, far longer than the people dying all around him, and that he walked off the Carpathia alive. And what did he walk off with? Swollen feet. That is nearly the whole of it. A man who spent hours in freezing Atlantic water on the night the Titanic sank, came through it with feet swollen from the cold and very little else, and lived, hale, for another 44 years, dying at last of pneumonia in 1956. An old man, unrelated to any of this, having worked at sea for decades more, including through another world war. So the question hangs there, the one everyone reaches for. How? And here is where I have to take something away from you, gently, because you may have heard the answer before, and the answer you have heard is wrong. The popular explanation, the one that gets repeated with a knowing smile, is that the alcohol saved him. That the stiff drink Charles Jokin took below decks kept him warm in the water, insulated him somehow, gave him his edge. It is a lovely story, and it is exactly backwards. Alcohol does the opposite of keeping you warm. It opens up the blood vessels near the surface of your skin, which is why a drink can make you feel flushed and warm for a moment. And that very opening dumps your core heat out to the surface and away into the cold, faster than it would otherwise go. In freezing water, a belly full of spirits is a liability, not a life preserver. The drink almost certainly did nothing good for his body at all. If it helped him in any way, it helped the part of him that was afraid, and not the part of him that was cold. So, if it was not the brandy, then what was it? The same thing it always is, the thing under every story tonight. His head stayed dry, and he never took the killing first shock. He kept calm, when calm was the rarest thing on that ocean. And the cold itself, the same cold taking everyone around him, slowed his body down toward that strange protected stillness, buying him a margin the panicking and the submerged never got. The cold did not spare Charles Jochen because he was drunk. It spared him as much as it spared anyone, for the very reason it spares any of the people in this collection. Because deep down, past a certain point, the cold stops only being the thing that kills you and starts, quietly, to be the thing that keeps you. Which brings us off the great famous ocean and back to something much smaller and much closer to home. A quiet pond, a winter afternoon, and a set of small tracks in the snow running from a house toward the ice. We are going to keep this one gentle, because it concerns a small child, and because his family has chosen, rightly, to keep his name their own. So he will just be the boy, and I will tell you what happened to him with the care his parents would want, and no more of the hard detail than the story needs to be true. He was 8 years old, and he lived in the middle of Pennsylvania, and one cold day, with the temperature a few degrees below freezing, he went out to play in the snow the way 8-year-olds do. Near his home there was a pond, and the pond was iced over, the way a winter pond is, with ice that looks solid and certain across the whole white surface of it, and is not, in fact, solid everywhere, and gives no warning about where. What his parents came to, when they came looking, was a set of tracks. Small tracks, a child's tracks, and the marks of a sled, running out from the direction of home, and across the snow, and onto the ice of the pond. And then, out on that white surface, a place where the ice was broken. I do not need to walk you through what a mother and father understand in the half-second of seeing that. You understand it too. The tracks going out, and the dark broken place in the ice, and no small figure anywhere on the whiteness. They understood it all at once, the way you would, and they did what you would do, which was to refuse it with everything they had, and to get help, and to get to that hole in the ice. By the time he was found and brought up out of that water, the boy had been under it for a very long time. The confirmed figure, and it is a figure that the doctors themselves could hardly believe when they wrote it down later, is 147 minutes. Nearly 2.5 hours submerged in the freezing water beneath the ice of a pond. There is a rule of thumb about the drowned, and it is a grim one, and it is why what happened next is so hard to fathom. Minutes matter. A person pulled from the water without a pulse has a window measured in the low single digits of minutes before the damage becomes the kind you do not come back from. And here was a small boy who had been under for 147 of them. And yet, the people who had him would not stop. Through the whole transport, on the way to the hospital, they did CPR on that child. Continuously. For 69 minutes, hands kept pushing on the chest of a boy who, by every ordinary rule, was long past saving, keeping a trickle of blood moving through him, refusing, mile after mile, to be the one who called it. And, at the hospital, they did what Tromsø had done for Anna, and what Lehigh Valley had done for Justin. They put him on ECMO, the machine that warms the blood from the inside and does the work of the heart, and they began, with enormous care, to bring him up out of the cold. And how cold was the middle of him? His core temperature, at its lowest, was 7 degrees Celsius. 7. I have given you a lot of numbers tonight, and I want you to feel the shape of this one. Anna Bogenholm, the outer edge of adult survival, was 13.7. This child was at 7. That is, not a temperature the human body is supposed to reach and return from. It is, on paper, well past the point of no return. But here is the quiet mercy folded into this particular story, the thing that made it possible at all. A small child's body cools fast, faster than an adult's, because there is so much less of it. And a child's body carries, down in its wiring, an old reflex from somewhere deep in our animal past, a thing that fires when a young face goes into cold water, that slows the heart and shunts the blood inward to protect the core, the heart, the brain. In children, it is strongest of all. And so, this boy, going under, was cooled and protected and slowed toward that gray-held breath, faster and more completely than a grown man ever could be. The very speed of his freezing, the thing that reads as horror on the page, was the thing that carried him through the 2.5 hours with something still left to save. They warmed him slowly, degree by careful degree, as slowly as they had to, because to rush a body up from 7 degrees is to kill it in the rewarming. And they watched, as everyone in these stories always has to watch, to see not only whether the heart would hold, but whether the boy would come back with it. He came back. The recovery of a body that cold and that long submerged is not a single triumphant morning. It is months. It is small thing after small thing gathered slowly. But the small things came. He began, in time, to follow simple instructions, short commands, the doctor's careful tests of a returning mind. He stood on his own, unsupported. He began to eat again. And at the 6-month mark, the boy who had spent 147 minutes under the ice of a Pennsylvania pond was riding a tricycle. A tricycle. Pedaling. A child again, doing a child's thing in the ordinary sunlight. His doctors wrote his case up carefully and published it in 2025 in a medical journal, not for the wonder of it, though it is a wonder, but for the use of it. So that the next set of hands over the next small body, pulled too late from the next cold pond, would have a reason to keep going past the point where the rules say stop. His survival became, in that quiet, permanent way, a small piece of the argument for not giving up. His 2.5 hours became the new far edge of what is known to be survivable. That boy's parents refused for 147 minutes, and a hospital refused for 69 more. The next man we are going to meet had no one refusing for him at all. No parents at the ice, no team doing compressions. He was entirely alone, in the snow, in the far north of Sweden, and the only person who could refuse to let him die was himself. And he had to keep it up, not for minutes, but for 2 months. Everything we have watched tonight has happened fast. A fall, a night, an afternoon under the ice, hours of frantic work, a rescue that lives or dies in a single day. This story is different. This one is slow. It unfolds not over minutes or hours, but over the better part of 2 months, in a stillness so complete that it is almost harder to sit with than any emergency. So slow down with me and go to Sweden, to the deep forests near a city called Umeå, in the winter that turned from 2011 into 2012. Peter Skillberg was a man in his mid-40s, and in the December of that winter, he drove his car down a small forest road, a remote track running out through the snow-heavy trees, well off the beaten way. And out there, on that lonely road, the car came to a stop and did not start again. Stuck. Far from anywhere, in the short grey days and the long nights of a northern Swedish December, with the snow already deep and more of it coming. And then it snowed. And it kept snowing, the way it does up there, day after day, storm after storm, through the whole of a Scandinavian winter. And the snow rose up around the stopped car. It drifted against the doors and climbed the windows, and, over the weeks, came up over the roof, until the car was not a car sitting on a road anymore, but a shape buried in a white field, indistinguishable from a boulder or a stump or a fold in the land, with a man inside it. The temperature outside, in that stretch, fell to 30 degrees below zero on the Celsius scale. And Peter Skillberg stayed in his buried car, day after day, week after week, while the world above forgot there was a road there at all. Now, you are doing the arithmetic that everyone does, and the arithmetic says he should have died in the first few nights. 30 below, no heat, a metal box that ought to be colder inside than out. So, how does a man last? Not a night, not a week, but something on the order of 60 days, in a car, in a Swedish winter, with no food. The answer is a thing that scientists talked about afterward, and it has a name that fits it beautifully. The igloo effect. Snow is not, as it happens, a good conductor of cold. It is full of air, trapped in all its little crystalline spaces, and trapped air is an insulator. It is the whole principle of the igloo, that a house built of snow, sealed by a body's own warmth, will hold a pocket of survivable air inside it, while the wind screams murder outside. And Peter Skillberg's buried car became, entirely by accident, an igloo. The thick blanket of snow over and around it cut it off from the killing wind and from the worst of the outside cold, and sealed in what little warmth there was, and held the inside of that car, we think, at a temperature that a still, slowed, sheltered human body could just barely endure. He had no food. For water, there was snow, endless snow, which he could melt. And the body, given nothing to run on, does what these bodies have all been doing tonight in their different ways. It slows down. It banks its fires. It drops its own temperature and its own demands and enters a kind of long, dim, waiting hibernation, burning as little of itself as it possibly can, stretching a life out across days it has no business surviving. That is, we believe, what Peter Skillberg's body did. It powered down to almost nothing, and it waited in the white silence for something to change. for 60 days, nothing did. A buried car on a forgotten road, and a man inside it, going slower and slower, and the snow lying over all of it, giving no sign. At the end of February, a passerby on a snowmobile came down that forgotten road and noticed the buried shape and thought, perhaps, that someone had dumped a car and left it, and went to look, and dug down to the window, and found, inside, a living man. Barely living. Skillberg was in a sleeping bag in the back, gaunt to the bone, able to move only a little, able to speak only a little, but alive and awake and himself. They got him out and to the hospital, and here is the part that sets his story apart from nearly every other one tonight. He did not need a heart-lung machine. He did not need to be thawed from the inside on ECMO. He was not pulseless on a table with 100 people working over him. His body temperature on rescue was reported, though not officially, at around 31 degrees Celsius, low but not in the abyss the others fell to. He needed food and warmth and time and ordinary care on an ordinary ward. His body had done the impossible thing quietly, by itself, over 2 months, and mostly what it needed now was to be let gently back up. And because it is such a strange survival, because there is no machine and no doctor to point to, only a buried car and a man's own slowed metabolism and 60 days, it remains, honestly, an argument. There are doctors and forensic specialists who have looked at Peter Skillberg's story and questioned whether a human being truly can last 2 months that way, who wonder about the exact conditions, who are not fully satisfied. And I think the honest thing, on a channel that cares about the truth, is to leave that argument where it stands, open. Skillberg himself never gave interviews, never went on the shows, never tried to sell the tale or settle the science. He simply went back to being a private man who had spent a winter buried in the snow and lived, and left the rest of us to argue about how. Some doors close with a clean click. This one stays a little ajar, and that is all right. Not everything in the cold gives up its whole explanation. Peter Skillberg survived because a wall of snow, of all things, kept him alive. The next man we meet was nearly killed by exactly the thing that saved Skillberg. He was buried in snow too. But the snow did not shelter him. It fell on him like a mountain, all at once, and closed over his head in the dark. We are quietly working toward a milestone here, and I want to let you in on it, because you are the ones who make it possible. We are pushing to reach 500 followers. It is not an enormous number in the great scheme of the internet, but it is real progress for a small show made with a lot of care, and honestly, we need your help to get there. If a story tonight has settled into you, if any of these people are going to stay with you after the lights are out, you could do 3 small things. Share the episode with one person you think would like it. Leave the show a rating. And drop a comment telling us where in the world you are listening from, or the piece of history you love the most. That small handful of activity is the thing, the actual mechanism that tells the algorithm to carry this show out to more people like you, more night owls in more dark rooms who would want exactly this. It costs you a moment, and it means a great deal on our end. Thank you. Truly. Now, back to the snow and the man it fell on. There is a particular terror to an avalanche that the other cold deaths do not have. It is not slow, like Skilberg's buried winter, and it is not the shocking plunge of the ice giving way. It is a mountain, deciding, in an instant, to move, and it takes a person and buries them under tons of snow so fast and so completely that one moment there is a skier or a climber under the open sky, and the next there is nothing at all, only an unbroken white slope where a life used to be, and no sign of where beneath it that life is now stopping. In January of the year 2000, in the western Austrian Alps, a young man of 24 was caught in exactly that. An avalanche came down, and it took him and it buried him. Not near the surface, where a hand might reach or a probe might find. It put him down at a depth of about 2.5 meters. More than the height of a tall man, of packed avalanche snow pressed over top of him in the cold and the dark and the silence. And by every reasonable expectation, that is the end of a person. Buried that deep in an avalanche, most people have a window of survival measured in a short number of minutes, because the snow that entombs you is also the snow that suffocates you, packing so tight around your face that there is no air left to breathe. The great majority of avalanche deaths are exactly that, not the impact. The slow smothering under the white or the cold that follows. But this young man had one thing, one small gift of chance, the same kind of gift that has run like a thread through every story tonight. When the snow came to rest around him, there was, at his mouth and nose, a pocket, a small space of air trapped against his face. An air pocket, the single most important thing a buried person can have, because it means there is something to breathe, for a while, down there in the dark. And so, 2.5 meters under the surface of an Austrian mountain, the young man did not immediately suffocate. He lay in his pocket of air, in a blackness and a silence more total than most of us will ever know, and he waited to be found. He waited for 20 hours. 20 hours. Think of the span of that. A full day, nearly, buried alive under 2.5 meters of snow, while on the surface, the rescuers searched a mountainside for a single body under an ocean of white. The cold worked on him the whole time, the way it has worked on everyone tonight, pulling his temperature down, slowing his heart, dimming him toward that gray country. When at last they found him and dug him out, his core temperature had fallen to about 22.5 degrees Celsius. His heart was beating around 35 times a minute, slow and labored. He was, in the doctor's careful phrase, responsive but uncoordinated, a man barely there, flickering, but there. It stands as one of the longest that anyone has survived a critical burial like that, a full-depth avalanche entombment, and lived. They brought him to the hospital, and they warmed him with great care, using a form of dialysis to heat his blood gently, about 1 degree an hour, no faster, easing him up out of the cold across the better part of a day, the same slow patience every one of these rescues demands. He came back to consciousness somewhere around 30 degrees. And he came back as himself, his mind intact, having spent 20 hours in a grave of snow and climbed, in the end, back out of it. He did not escape entirely clean. The long cold left him with some lasting nerve trouble in his legs, a mild and permanent reminder written into his body of the day the mountain fell on him. But he lived, and he thought, and he walked, more or less, out of a burial that should, by every rule, have been final. And here is the small, strange grace note on his story. The doctors who treated him held on to his case and studied it, and did not publish it to the world for 24 years. It was only decades later that his 20 hours under the snow became part of the medical record, a quiet astonishment surfacing a generation after the fact. Another piece of evidence in the long argument that the cold does not always mean what it seems to mean. That young man was saved, in the end, by strangers with shovels and a machine that warmed his blood. The next boy we meet was given up on by the machines entirely. The people with the training and the equipment had done everything they knew how to do for the better part of an hour, and they had stopped, and they had told his mother it was time to say goodbye. Come back across the ocean to the middle of the United States, to Missouri, to a January day in 2015, and to a 14-year-old boy named John Smith. It was the kind of afternoon that a 14-year-old thinks nothing of. John and two of his friends went out onto a frozen lake, Lake St. Louis, the way boys have always been drawn out onto frozen water, because the ice is there and it is an adventure, and nothing has ever happened to them before. One of them wanted a photograph. So they went out toward the middle, 3 boys on the white surface, and one of them lifted a phone to take a picture. And the ice gave way. All 3 of them went into the water at once, into a lake sitting at around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to steal the breath and the strength in short order. 2 of the boys were closer to the edge, or luckier, and were reached and pulled out. John was not. John went under, out toward the middle, and the surface closed over the place where he had been, and he did not come back up. He was under that water for around 15 minutes before rescue divers, working in the cold and the dark below the ice, found his body and brought it up. 15 minutes submerged. And when they got him to the surface and to the hospital nearby, he had no pulse. There was no life in him that anyone could find. At the hospital, the team went to work on him the way these teams do, and they did not give up quickly. They worked on John Smith for a long time, trying everything they had, running the full length of what medicine knows to do for a pulseless, drowned, freezing boy. And for around 45 minutes, it did nothing. No pulse. No response. No flicker of the boy coming back. There is a point, and every one of these doctors knows where it is, at which continuing is no longer medicine, but something closer to denial. And the humane thing, the honest thing, is to stop. The team reached that point. After roughly 45 minutes with no result, they prepared to do the hardest thing their job asks of them. They stopped, or were about to, and they brought in John's mother. Her name is Joyce. And they brought her to her son so that she could say goodbye. Now, I am going to tell you what happened next, exactly the way John's family tells it, because it is their account, and it is theirs to give. And I am neither going to dress it up nor argue with it. I am simply going to hand it to you, the way they hand it. Joyce Smith came to her son's side, to a boy the doctors had worked on for 45 minutes and could not bring back, a boy they had readied her to lose. And she did not say goodbye. She prayed. Out loud, over him, she called on God to give her son back, saying, as she remembers it, that she believed in a mighty God who could still perform a miracle. She prayed over the still body of her boy. And within a minute or two of that prayer, the monitor found a pulse. His heart, silent for something like 45 minutes, began to beat. The team, who had been on the very edge of stopping, surged back into action around a boy who was, impossibly, back. They stabilized him and flew him to a children's hospital, to Cardinal Glennon, and the same long, uncertain vigil began that we have kept so many times tonight. The waiting to see, not just whether the heart would hold, but whether the boy would return with it. I told you a number a moment ago, about 45 minutes, and I want to be honest about it, because this story in particular has grown in the telling. You will sometimes hear that John Smith was without a pulse for over an hour. The hospital's own figure is closer to 45, 46 minutes. That is astonishing enough. It does not need to be stretched, and the family's account does not depend on the stretch. 45 minutes is already well past the point from which a 14-year-old is supposed to return whole. He returned whole. Within a couple of days, he was answering, responding to the people around him with small movements, a hand signal, a sign that the boy was in there and coming back. And the coming back, once it started, was swift and complete. There was no lasting damage to his brain. Within a couple of weeks, he walked out of that hospital, and the image everyone kept, the one that says it best, is of John Smith leaving, bouncing a basketball. A boy dribbling a basketball out of the building he had been carried into without a pulse. His story became a book and then a film that a lot of you will have seen or heard of, and John himself grew up and spoke, in time, about faith and about the ministry he felt called toward, a young man shaped for the rest of his life by an afternoon on the ice and the 45 minutes his heart forgot to beat. What his mother did in that room belongs to the family and to their faith, and I leave it with them exactly as they tell it. What is not in dispute by anyone is the boy walking out with the basketball. John's mother refused to let him go with a prayer out loud in a hospital room. In a snowstorm high in the mountains between France and Spain, another person refused just as hard, but with no words and no prayer at all. Only his 2 bare hands and 6 hours of holding on to a wife he was certain was already gone. In November of 2019, a British woman named Audrey Mash was living in Barcelona and doing what she loved on a day off, which was walking in the mountains. She was 34. She and her husband, Rohan Showman, had gone up into the Pyrenees, the high range that runs along the border between Spain and France, onto a route in an area called the Coma de Vaca. It was meant to be a good day out in the cold, clean air of the mountains. And the weather turned on them. Not an avalanche, though you will sometimes hear it told that way. A snowstorm. The mountain weather did what mountain weather does, which is to change its mind without warning and become, in a very short time, something that can kill you. The temperature dropped and the snow came in, and the two of them were caught out in it, high up, exposed. Rohan noticed it in her speech first. That is often how the cold announces itself, before the person it is working on has any idea. Audrey began to talk strangely. Her words came out wrong, incoherent, the sentences not quite connecting. The way a person sounds when the cold has climbed far enough into them to start switching off the higher rooms of the brain. She was not making sense. And then, sheltering as best they could behind a rock while they waited for help, she lost consciousness altogether. Rohan checked her, the way you check, the way Don Smith checked his son in the snow. He felt for breath. He felt for a pulse. And he found neither. His wife, in his arms, on a mountainside, in a snowstorm, had no breath and no heartbeat that he could find. And the help they had called for could not come. The same storm that was killing Audrey had shut the sky. The rescue helicopter could not fly into it. So there was no swift descent, no fast hands taking her from him. There was only Rohan, alone, high on the mountain, holding the body of his wife, who by every sign he could read was dead, and waiting, because there was nothing else in the world to do, for a break in the weather that would let someone come. He held her like that for about 2 hours. When the helicopter could finally reach them, they took Audrey down off the mountain to the Vall d'Hebron hospital in Barcelona, and the doctors there did the thing this whole night has been building a case for. They looked at a woman with no heartbeat, a woman whose husband had felt her die 2 hours before on a mountainside, and they did not accept it, because she was cold, and the cold changes the rules. Her core temperature was down around 18 degrees Celsius, perhaps 20 by the time they had a firm reading in the hospital. Deep in the range where the heart simply stops and the body goes still and the ordinary signs of life vanish. So they connected her to ECMO, the machine we have met so many times tonight, and they began to warm her blood from the inside, slowly, carefully, doing the work of the heart that would not do its own work. And they did not try to restart her heart while she was cold, because a cold heart will not take the shock, and to try is to fail. They waited. They warmed her, degree by degree, and they watched the number climb, and only when she had come up to around 30 degrees, warm enough that the heart might answer, did they deliver the shock. And her heart, which had been still for around 6 hours, started again. 6 hours. It is, on the record, the longest cardiac arrest that anyone in Spain has ever been brought back from. 6 hours, during which, by every measure that Rohan had on the mountain and every measure the machines had in the hospital, Audrey Mash was not alive. One of the doctors who treated her, a man named Jordi Riera, said the thing that scientists always seem to end up saying about these cases, almost against their will. As a scientist, he said, I don't like the word, but it's like a miracle. Audrey woke about 11 days later. And here is the detail that makes her story sit differently from all the others, the thing that has stayed with me since I first read it. She remembers none of it. She has no memory of the words going strange, or of losing consciousness, or of the storm, or of the 2 hours in Rohan's arms, or of the 6 hours her heart lay still, or of the machine, or of the shock that started her again. For Audrey, there is simply the walk in the mountains, and then a great blank, and then a hospital bed 11 days later, and a husband beside her, who had been to a place she would never have to visit. She did not experience her own death. She was, in the strangest sense, not there for it. Which means the weight of it, all of it, sits with Rohan. He is the one who felt her go. He is the one who held what he was sure was her body for 2 hours in the snow. He is the one who carries the 6 hours. She got the mercy of the blank, and he got the memory. And there is something in that division that tells you what these stories are really about. Not the patient so much, who is often somewhere past knowing. The one who stays. The one who refuses. She came back nearly whole. Within a month, she was back at work. The cold left its small mark, a lingering trouble in her hands, a sensitivity that stayed with her, the far edges of her paying their fee, the way the far edges always seem to. But she lived, fully and clearly, and herself, carrying no scar where the trauma would be, because she was never there to receive it. Rohan refused to let go of a wife who would never remember it. The next man we meet refused to let go of a friend he had known for only a matter of days, and the cold took its price for that refusal out of his own 2 feet. He gave them, more or less on purpose, in the frozen middle of Greenland, in the middle of a war. In November of 1942, the Second World War was reaching even into the emptiest places on Earth, and there are few places emptier than the interior of Greenland, that vast dome of ancient ice, hundreds of miles across, where there is nothing but white in every direction, and a cold that the word cold does not really cover. An American bomber, a B-17, was flying over that ice on a rescue mission. That is the bleak poetry of it. They were out looking for another downed plane, trying to save other men, when they themselves flew into a whiteout, a storm, in which the white of the sky and the white of the ice become one seamless nothing, with no horizon, no up, no down, no way to tell where the ground is until you have hit it. And they hit it. The B-17 crashed onto the Greenland ice cap. By some grace, all 9 men aboard survived the crash itself. But surviving the crash and surviving Greenland are 2 very different problems, and the second one was only beginning. They were down on the ice cap, hundreds of miles from anything, in the deepening winter, with the temperature falling toward levels that freeze exposed flesh in minutes. Among them was a young lieutenant named William O'Hara. Bill O'Hara. And it is what Bill O'Hara did in the days after the crash that puts him in this collection. One of the great dangers of the ice cap is not on top of it, but inside it. The ice is riven with crevasses, deep splits, some of them 100 feet down or more, and they are often hidden, roofed over with a fragile crust of snow that looks exactly like solid ground, until the moment it isn't. One of the crewmen, a man named Harry Spencer, walked onto one of those hidden bridges, and it gave way, and he fell into the crevasse, down into the blue-black cold of the inside of the glacier. And Bill O'Hara went to get him out. Getting a man out of a 100-foot crack in a glacier is brutal, slow, desperate work, in the worst cold on Earth, with improvised gear and freezing hands. And, in the middle of doing it, O'Hara's boots filled with snow, packed with it, down against his feet, and there was no stopping to deal with it, because there was a man in a crevasse, and the work could not wait. So he kept at it, with snow packed against his feet, in Greenland, in winter, for as long as it took. They got Harry Spencer out. O'Hara's refusal, and the others, to leave a man in the ice worked, and Spencer lived. But O'Hara's feet had frozen. The snow packed in his boots had done, in those hours, exactly what the cold does to the far edges when the body is fighting to survive. It had begun to kill the flesh of his feet, and there was no fixing it out there. No hospital, no warmth, no way back. There was only the long wait for rescue, and his feet slowly, over the following weeks, going from frozen to worse, the tissue dying, a dry gangrene setting in, while he stayed alive on that ice with the rest of them. And the wait was not days. It was months. Rescuing men from the middle of the Greenland ice cap in the winter of 1942 was very nearly as hard as the crash had been. It took supply drops from the air to keep them alive. It took motor sledges. It took, eventually, the skill of a famous polar aviator, Bernd Bolchen, and a great deal of time and failure and persistence. The men of that B-17 were stranded on the ice for something on the order of 4 to 5 months. 4 to 5 months in the open, in the Arctic winter, being kept barely alive by parcels falling from the sky. And through all of it, Bill O'Hara endured on his dying feet. He said something later about that stretch that I think is one of the most honest things anyone in this entire collection ever said. He did not talk about courage or faith or the will to live. He said, "I can recall being a son of a bitch for 88 days. That is the truth of long survival that the tidy stories leave out. It does not make you noble. It makes you difficult and bitter and hard to be around, because staying alive when everything wants you dead takes a kind of ferocity that is not pretty to watch." He was a son of a bitch for 88 days, and being a son of a bitch for 88 days is very likely a large part of why he did not die. When they finally got him off the ice, his feet had, in the most literal and terrible sense, given out. By the time of the rescue, they had separated inside his boots. What the cold had begun in that crevasse, it had finished over the months. At Walter Reed, back home, both of his legs were amputated below the knee. He gave his feet, and then his legs, for the few minutes it took to pull Harry Spencer out of a hole in a glacier. And he did not die. He survived the ice cap and the amputations and the war itself, and lived on, a man who had traded the lower half of both legs for a stranger's life and his own, and who summed up the whole ordeal not with a speech, but with a shrug and a curse, and 88 days. Bill O'Hara refused to leave a man in the ice, and paid for it out of his own body. The next person to refuse was a mother in a Canadian city in the middle of the night, and what she would not let go of was very small indeed. A 13-month-old child, gone out an unlatched door into 24 below, and a line of tiny footprints in the snow. Edmonton, in the Canadian province of Alberta, is a winter city, a place that knows deep cold the way coastal cities know rain. In February of 2001, the family of a little girl named Erica Nordby was staying at a friend's home there. Erica was 13 months old, barely walking. The age at which a child has just discovered that doors are things that open, and that the world is on the other side of them. The back door of the house had a latch that did not quite catch. A small broken thing, the kind of thing in a home that everyone means to fix and no one does, because what harm could it come to? In the deep of the night, Erica woke and got herself up and went to that door, and it opened for her. And she walked out in the thin clothes she had slept in, into the Edmonton night. It was around 24 degrees below 0 Celsius. Colder still with the wind. A grown man in a coat would not want to be out in it for long. And out into it went a 13-month-old child, alone. Her mother was Layla, 26 years old. And at around 3 in the morning, Layla woke, the way mothers wake, to a wrongness she could not yet name, and went to check on her daughter, and found the bed empty. And then found the door. What she found outside was a line of footprints. Tiny footprints, her baby's footprints, pressed into the snow, leading away from the house across the white yard. She followed them. I want you to hold that image and not rush past it, because it is the center of the whole story. A mother in the dark and the cold at 3 in the morning, following her child's footprints across the snow, knowing with every step what she is walking toward, and refusing with every step to believe it. The footprints led about 25 feet to a snowbank, and in the snowbank was Erica. She was frozen, stiff, lifeless, her small body rigid, her feet frozen together. Layla gathered her up, and there was no warmth in her, and no movement, and no sign of the child who had been alive in her bed a few hours before. Layla said it later, plainly, and I will give it to you plainly, and then leave it, because it does not need my help. She was stiff in my arms, she said. I wrapped her in a big pink blanket, and I just rocked her and screamed. The paramedics came, and one of them, a woman named Krista Rempel, had seen something like this once before, years earlier. Another frozen child, so she knew, at least, that the word impossible was not always the last word. But even so, when they reached Erica, her jaw was frozen shut. Her body was so cold and so locked that they could not find a vein anywhere to give her the help she needed, and had to drive a needle directly into the bone of her lower leg to get a line into her at all. The thin clothes she had gone out in had frozen solid on her body, stiff as board, and had to be cut away. I mention that only to correct a small thing the story sometimes gets wrong, that she was out there in nothing but a diaper. She was dressed lightly, and what she wore had frozen hard around her in the night. It is a small correction, and I make it because the truth is the whole point of the exercise. They took her to the Stollery Children's Hospital in Edmonton. Her core temperature was around 16 degrees Celsius. She had no heartbeat and had had none, as best anyone could reckon, for something close to 2 hours. The surgeons prepared to open her chest and put her on a bypass machine, the full Borgenholm treatment, because it seemed the only chance. But before they got there, they warmed her with a forced air blanket, a device that wraps a body in a flow of heated air, bringing her temperature up gently from the outside. And near dawn, at around 5:45 in the morning, before they ever had to open her chest, Erica Nordby's heart began, on its own, to beat. One of her doctors, Alf Conradi, reached for the odds and gave up on them. "A 1 in a million chance," he said. He talked about there being only a handful of cases like it in all of the medical literature, 4 to 6 recorded children in the whole history of the field who had gone through something similar. For a child to have no heartbeat for in excess of 2 hours, he said, and come back really is extraordinary. Another of the doctors, Alan DeCahn, said something shorter and, I think, truer. "It's humbling," he said. "That is the word. Not triumphant. Humbling. These cases do that even to the experts. They put a person back on their heels before the sheer size of what a small body can endure." The fear now was the fear that shadows every one of these stories, and it had a specific shape for a child frozen that hard. Amputation. Surely a 13-month-old found frozen stiff in a snowbank, feet frozen together, core at 16 degrees, would lose something. Toes, feet, fingers, the far edges that freeze first and die first. She lost none of them. Erica Nordby kept all of it. There were skin grafts on one foot, and there was physiotherapy, and there were about 6 weeks in the hospital, and a slight lasting difference in one foot. But no amputations. No lasting damage to her brain. The child who had been rocked, stiff and screaming over, in her mother's arms at 3 in the morning, grew up whole, kept every toe, and walked and ran. An ordinary Canadian girl who had once, for 2 hours, in the eyes of medicine, been gone. The country fell in love with her. She was the miracle baby, for a while, on every front page. There was even a song written for her, by one of Canada's great old folk singers. And then, wisely, her family stepped back out of all that light and let her be a child instead of a headline, and let the footprints in the snow become just a story the family told, and not the whole of who she was allowed to be. Erica was saved by a mother who followed the footprints, and a paramedic who had seen it before, and a warm current of air. Every rescue tonight has had its people, its refusers, standing over the frozen with their stubbornness and their machines. But I want to take you now, before we come to the end, to a place and a time that had none of those things. No helicopter, no ECMO, no warm hospital, and no line of doctors. Only men, alone, at the top of the world, more than 100 years ago, keeping each other alive through a winter that killed most of them by nothing but the refusal to lie down. In the summer of 1881, a party of 25 men went north under the command of an army officer named Adolphus Greely to the high Arctic, to a place called Lady Franklin Bay, far up in the islands that scatter toward the pole above Canada. It was a scientific expedition, part of a great international effort of the age to study the top of the world. They were to make measurements and gather data and push, if they could, farther north than anyone had gone before. And in that first stretch, they succeeded. The expedition set a new record for the farthest north that human beings had reached, a genuine triumph, and among the men who pushed to that record was the expedition's first sergeant, a steady, capable man named David Brainerd. For a while, it was the good kind of Arctic story, the kind with a flag planted at a record, and everyone coming home to medals. But an Arctic expedition in that era lived or died by resupply. Ships were meant to come north each summer with food and word from home. And the ships did not come. One year the relief ship failed to get through the ice. The next year it failed again, and worse, sank. Twice, the lifeline simply did not arrive. And so Greely and his 25 men, up at the top of the world, ran out of the one thing the top of the world does not provide: food. They made a desperate retreat south, by boat and by sledge, to a wind-scoured spit of land called Cape Sabine. And there, as the long polar winter came down, they built what shelter they could and began to starve. I am going to tell you about that winter carefully, because it went to the darkest places that human survival can go, and this is not a channel that trades in horror for its own sake. But the truth of it matters, and I will not hide it from you. They were starving, in the dark, in cold that fell to more than 20 below 0 Fahrenheit, and worse, in a shelter that was barely a shelter. And one by one, through the winter, the men began to die. Of hunger, of cold, of the two of them together, which take a body faster than either alone. Brainerd's own fingers froze in the terrible cold. The men grew weaker and fewer, and the situation grew more desperate than words comfortably hold. Desperate enough that discipline broke. One man was caught stealing from the tiny store of food that was keeping the others alive. Food that was, in that place, quite literally, the difference between one man living and another dying, and he was, by Greeley's order, executed for it. And desperate enough that, when the winter was over and the survivors were found, it became clear that some of the living had done the thing that starving people at the very end have always, tragically, sometimes done, and had taken what sustenance they could from the bodies of the dead. I tell you this plainly, and I do not linger on it, because these were not monsters. They were ordinary men, at the absolute end of what a human being can endure, doing what the end drove them to. It is not a thing to gawk at. It is a thing to be sobered by. Through all of it, David Brainerd did not die. He kept himself and helped keep others alive, week after impossible week, as the group dwindled from 25 toward almost nothing. He kept a diary. Even then, even there, the disciplined hand of a sergeant recording the dying of his friends and the endurance of the rest. When the relief expedition finally fought its way to Cape Sabine in June of 1884, they found, of the 25 men who had gone north, 7 still alive. 7, barely, at the last edge of it, so far gone that one of them, a man named Ellison, died within days, despite the rescue. His body, too damaged by the cold to be brought back even once help had come. 6 came back. 6 out of 25. David Brainerd was one of the 6. And, unlike so many in this collection, he came back without the loss of a piece of himself. His frozen fingers somehow survived. He walked out of the worst Arctic ordeal of his century substantially intact, and he did not let it be the end of his story. He stayed in the army. He rose over the long decades of a full life, all the way to brigadier general. And he lived and lived, outlasting every other man who had stood with him at Cape Sabine, until he was the last one left alive of all of them, dying at last in 1946, more than 60 years after the winter that killed his friends. He wrote a book about it late in life, and he called it, simply, 6 Came Back. And he said a thing about being the final survivor, the one who carries a story after everyone who shared it is gone, that reaches out of his century into ours and touches every person who has ever outlived the people they went through something with. To be the last man, he said, is a lonesome job. That is survival's quiet, unglamorous cost, the one the amputations and the frostbite do not show. To live is, often, to be the one who remains, to carry it alone. Brainerd and his men endured the top of the world by the hardest and darkest means there are, in a place that offered them nothing at all. Go back now, further still, more than 100 years further, to a small village in the mountains of Italy, and to 3 people who survived a burial nearly as long by the humblest means imaginable. A few goats, a handful of chestnuts, and each other in the dark. It is the 19th of March, in the year 1755, in a tiny hamlet called Berga Mileto, high in the western Italian Alps. This is long before any of the medicine we have leaned on tonight. No hospital, no machine, no doctor, with a rule about warm and dead. Only a mountain village in the last of a hard winter, and the snow piled deep on the slopes above it. And on that day, the slope let go. An avalanche came down onto Bergamo-Letto, an enormous one, laying snow some 18 meters deep, the height of a 5-story building, across the little settlement. It buried houses. It buried barns. It killed 22 people in the space of a few moments, nearly the whole of that small place, gone under the white in an afternoon. Among the buildings it crushed was a stable. And inside that stable, when the snow came down and caved the roof and sealed it off from the world, were 4 people and their animals. 2 grown women, a young girl, and a boy. They had been seeing to the livestock, the goats, and the other animals a mountain family lives by, when the mountain fell on them and shut them into a pocket of ruined timber and packed snow, in total darkness, 18 meters down. Above them, the village that survived at all assumed, reasonably, that everyone caught under that much snow was dead. There was no digging out a stable from under 18 meters of avalanche in 1755. Not quickly, not with any hope. The snow would have to melt. And so the days began to pass. Here is the almost unbelievable thing. Down in the crushed stable, in the pitch black, 3 of the 4 were alive. And they stayed alive, not for hours, not for days, but for weeks, by the sheer improvisation of the desperate. They had their animals with them. Some of the goats had survived the collapse too, penned in the same dark pocket. And so, the survivors did the only thing there was to do. They milked them. In the blackness, by feel, they kept the goats alive as long as they could and drank their milk, and that milk, more than anything else, is what kept the human beings breathing. There were a few chestnuts, a small store of them, that had been in the stable. There was a little meat when an animal died. And for water, there was the thing that had buried them, the snow itself, endless above and around them, which they could melt with the warmth of their own bodies and their own breath and drink. They could not see. They had no fire, no light, no way to mark the passing of day into night, except the slow arithmetic of hunger and cold. They did not know if anyone was coming. They did not know if anyone above even believed them alive. They simply endured, in the dark, one milking and one melted mouthful of snow at a time, keeping each other company and keeping each other going, while the enormous mound of snow over their heads gave up its cold a single degree at a time to the arriving spring. The boy did not survive it. I will tell you that plainly and gently, and then leave him his peace, because he was a child, and he was lost early in that dark, and the 2 women and the girl who lived carried him with them through all the weeks that followed. That is its own kind of weight, to endure beside a grief you cannot bury, in a place you cannot leave. It took 37 days. 37 days before the melting snow and the digging of the survivors above uncovered the stable, and someone broke through into that black pocket and found, against every expectation the world had, 3 living people. 2 women and a little girl, drawn out of the ruins of a stable into a spring daylight they had not seen in over a month, alive. They were, as you would be, wrecked by it. They were emaciated, wasted down to almost nothing by the weeks of near starvation. They could not stand. They could not walk. Their legs trembled and would not hold them. One of the women had suffered lasting damage to her eyes from the long total darkness and would carry the mark of those 37 days in her sight and, by the old accounts, in her mind, waking from it changed in the way that people are changed by having been somewhere no one is meant to go. They did not come out unscathed. Nobody in this collection ever quite does. But they came out. And their survival so astonished the learned men of the day that a professor of medicine from the university at Turin, a man named Ignazio Somis, came and studied them and wrote a careful book about the whole thing 3 years later, trying to understand how a human body could last 37 days buried alive under a mountain of snow. It stands, still, as the longest that anyone is known to have survived an avalanche burial. 270 years ago, with no medicine and no machine and no rescue worth the name, 3 people kept themselves alive in the dark for over a month on goat's milk and melted snow, and each other, and were dug out into the light, and lived. There was no doctor to refuse to give up on them. There was no one, for 37 days, saying not yet on their behalf, because no one above even knew they were there to say it for. So they said it for themselves and for each other, in the dark, without words, simply by milking the goats one more time, and drinking the snow one more time, and lasting one more day. The refusal, this time, came entirely from inside the grave. Which is, in the end, exactly where our last story is going. We have one story left tonight. The most famous of them, in its way, and the one that gathers up everything the others have been circling. Nearly every refusal we have watched has come from the outside, from a father, a doctor, a husband, a mother, a friend, a whole team of strangers, someone standing over the frozen and saying, on their behalf, not yet. And once or twice, as in that Italian stable, it has come from the buried themselves. In this last story, at the very top of the world, it comes from inside a dying man who has already been given up by everyone, and it is the purest, not yet, of them all. But before we climb the last mountain, let me ask one small thing of you. If there is a story you have always wanted told this way, slowly, in the dark, at the edge of sleep, I would love to know it. Leave it in the comments below, a person from history, an event, a corner of the past you have always wondered about, or simply one you love and think the rest of these night owls should hear. And I will go first, as is our habit here, so it is a fair exchange. The story I have been quietly wanting to tell for a long while now is the story of a lighthouse keeper and the winter storm that cut him off from the world. But I will keep that one in my pocket a little longer, until the season is right for it. Tell me yours. I read them. Now, the last mountain and the man who walked down off it. His name was Beck Weathers, and he was a pathologist from Dallas, Texas, a doctor who spent his working days looking at tissue and cells and the small hidden truths of the body. And he carried, for much of his adult life, a heaviness that he did not talk about easily, a depression that sat on him and would not lift. He found, somewhere along the way, that the one place the heaviness loosened its grip was on the sides of mountains. Up high, in the thin air and the cold, and the total demand of the climb, there was no room left over for the darkness. So he climbed. Not because he was a natural mountaineer, but because the mountains were the one place his own mind would leave him alone. That is what took him, in the spring of 1996, to the highest mountain on Earth. Beck Weathers was a paying client on a guided expedition attempting the summit of Mount Everest, part of a team led by a famous and careful guide named Rob Hall. He was there, in a sense, still running from the thing at home, still using the mountain the way he had always used the mountain, to quiet himself. There was a complication particular to Beck. He had recently had a kind of eye surgery, a procedure on the cornea, and he did not fully understand until he was up high that the low pressure at altitude did strange things to his corrected eyes. As he climbed into the death zone, the highest reaches where the air holds too little oxygen to sustain life for long, Beck's vision began to fail him. He went, effectively, snowblind. And so Rob Hall, sensibly, told him to stop, to wait at a point on the route called the balcony, at around 27,000 feet, and not to move from there until Hall could collect him on the way back down. Beck agreed. He stood, half-blind, at 27,000 feet, and he waited. And while he waited, the mountain turned on all of them. A storm came in. Not an ordinary storm. One of the rogue, catastrophic blizzards that Everest produces, a whiteout of shrieking wind and driving snow, with wind chills that plunged toward 100 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. It came in fast, and it caught climbers, strung out all across the upper mountain, in the worst possible place, and it became, over that night and the next day, one of the deadliest disasters in the mountain's history. Men and women who had been within reach of the summit were suddenly fighting, and in several cases losing, for their lives. Beck was out in it. Blind, alone at first, then gathered up with a group of other lost climbers, wandering in the whiteout unable to find the camp. Through the night they were out in that, and by the time they were located, Beck Weathers had collapsed into the snow beside another climber, a Japanese woman named Yasuko Number, and both of them were unconscious and all but gone. And here is where the mountain makes its cruelest kind of decision. Rescuers reached them, and they examined Beck, and they examined Yasuko, and they made the judgment that has to be made in the death zone, where a person can only carry so much, and there is not enough of anything to go around, and the strong must sometimes be spent on the ones who can still be saved. They judged Beck and Yasuko to be beyond help, as good as dead, and they left them where they lay to do what could be done for those with a chance. Not once, twice. Beck Weathers was examined and written off and left for dead twice by people who were not cruel, who were making the only rational call the mountain allowed. on a man with no meaningful vital signs, freezing into the snow at 26,000 feet. By every judgment available to skilled people on that mountain, he was finished. His teammates began, down at the camps and back in the world, the grim work of counting him among the lost. Word went out. Beck Weathers was dead on Everest. And then, the next day, alone, out in the open on the roof of the world, Beck Weathers opened his eyes. He should not have. There is no medical account that fully explains why he did. A man that cold, that oxygen-starved, that far gone, hours after being twice pronounced beyond saving. But he came up out of it, out of the deep, gray country, into a strange and terrible clarity. And what brought him up, by his own account, the only account there is, was not medicine, and not luck, and not the cold's chemistry. It was a picture in his mind. He saw his family, his wife, his children. He has said that an image of them rose up in front of him, vivid, complete, and that with it came a single understanding, so sharp it stood him up out of the snow, which was that if he did not move, right now, he was never going to see them again. Every other refusal in this collection has come from someone else, from the person keeping watch over the frozen. Beck Weathers, with no one left to keep watch over him, everyone having already given him up, became his own watcher. The refusal came from inside the dying man. He looked at his own death, which everyone around him had already accepted on his behalf, and from somewhere down in the ruin of him, he said it, the thing this whole night has been made of. Not yet. And then he stood up, a blind, frozen, half-dead man at 26,000 feet, and he began to walk toward where he believed the camp must be, unable to see it, guided by little more than the shape of the light and the will not to stop. And somehow, impossibly, he walked the right way. The people at Camp 4 looked up and saw a figure coming toward them out of the ice, lurching, barely upright, crusted over with frost, and as it got closer, they saw a man they knew to be dead. His bare right hand was held up and out in front of him, frozen solid in a strange gesture, like a stiff salute. His face was frostbitten to a hard porcelain white. He looked, one of them said, like a mummy walking. Even then, even when he walked into camp on his own 2 feet, having come back from a place no one comes back from, the mountain was not done bargaining. He was so far gone that the instinct of the exhausted people who received him was not to celebrate, but to make him comfortable, to put him somewhere warm and let him die in peace, because surely a man in that condition could not truly be saved and would only die again by morning. They half wrote him off a 3rd time. He survived that night too. What it took to get Beck Weathers off Everest was, in the end, historic. He was eventually brought down and evacuated by a helicopter flying higher than a helicopter had ever performed a rescue on that mountain. A pilot risking everything in air, almost too thin to fly in. For a man who had already been declared dead more times than most people are declared anything. The cold took its price, and it was steep. Beck lost his right hand and part of the forearm. He lost all the fingers and the thumb of his left hand. He lost his nose, which the surgeons later rebuilt for him out of tissue from his ear and his forehead, an astonishing patient reconstruction. He went home to Dallas, a changed shape of a man, and went back, remarkably, to his work in pathology, to the tissue and the cells and the small hidden truths of the body. Now, reading them with hands, the mountain had redesigned. But the strangest part of Beck Weathers' story is not the loss. It is the repair. He had gone to the mountains all those years to run from a darkness in his own life, from a depression that had strained his marriage and distanced him from the family he loved. And it was the mountain nearly killing him. It was lying twice dead in the snow and being stood back up by the vision of his wife and children that broke the pattern. He came home and he did the work, the harder work, the work at altitude of the heart, and by his own telling, the disaster that took his hands gave him back his family and his life. The thing that nearly ended him is the thing that saved him, which is, if you have been listening tonight, the oldest story we have. There is a sentence that has been waiting under this whole night that the doctors in Norway put into their journals so it would not be lost. You're not dead until you're warm and dead. It began as a hard clinical rule about not giving up on the cold. But listen to what it really says. It says that the appearance of the end is not the end. That there is a country between gone and not gone, wider than we let ourselves believe, and that people cross back out of it, carried by the strange mercy of the cold, and by someone, somewhere, even if it is only themselves, refusing to accept what everyone can plainly see. Beck Weathers walked down out of that country on his own 2 frozen feet toward the faces of the people he loved. And he was not, it turned out, warm and dead. He was only cold, and not, in the end, done. So there they all are, laid out across 100 years and half the world. A young man in a Pennsylvania snowbank found by his father. A woman in a Minnesota ditch, frozen too hard for a needle. A doctor under the ice in Norway who gave medicine its sentence. A kayaker whose own watch recorded his heart, giving up and taking it back. A baker riding the Titanic down like an elevator. A boy under a pond for 147 minutes. A man in a buried car for 2 months of snow. A snowboarder, 20 hours under the white. Another boy and his mother's prayer. A wife, her husband, held for 6 hours in a storm. A soldier who gave his feet to a crevasse. A baby and the footprints in the snow. 6 men out of 25 at the top of the world. 2 women and a girl under an Italian stable for 37 days on goat's milk and melted snow. And a mountaineer who was dead 3 times and walked home anyway. Different countries, different centuries, different cold. And in every single one of them, the same quiet thing. Someone looked at what everyone agreed was death, the still chest, the missing pulse, the grey skin, the fixed and open eyes, and something in them refused it. A father who kept checking. A doctor who would not sign the form. A mother who followed the footprints. A team that would not stop the compressions. And, at the very last, a dying man on a mountain who stood himself back up. Not yet, each of them said, against all the evidence. Not yet. And here is the gentle secret the whole strange collection has been keeping. The thing that nearly killed all these people is a close cousin of the thing that is about to happen to you tonight. When your body carries you down into sleep, it does it by letting go of a little of its own warmth. Your core temperature drifts down just slightly by a fraction of a degree, and that soft falling away of heat is one of the oldest signals your brain has ever known. The signal that says, "It is safe now, you can go under." The tide that took these people at its cruelest, the ebbing of the body's own warmth, is the very same tide that pulls the rest of us, every single night, gently and kindly, down into rest. They went too far out on it and were carried back. You are only going to drift out a little way, as you are meant to, and in the morning, the tide will carry you back too, a little stronger, a little wiser, the way it always does. There is nothing to fear in the cooling. It is just the body doing the oldest thing it knows. Let it. Let the warmth ebb, and let the dark come up around you, and go. Since you made it this far, I'm glad you enjoyed the episode. If you would like to continue listening to episodes with similar themes, I linked them in the description below. You will also find a playlist of our most popular videos. Sleep now, nightlings. And wake up, as always, a little stronger and a little wiser. The story is done, but yours continues.